Looks like we're getting close to getting going. Let's give everyone about 2 minutes and then we will get started. All right, I think it's about time we get going. Welcome to the final NWGA webinar of 2016. My name is Connor Wrighton, and I'm the Communications Manager for the Northwest Gas Association. Let me get this show going for everyone. Anyways, I look forward to finishing the 2016 NWGA webinar series strong, and here to help us do that is Chris McGill, who's going to tell us what to expect for the 2017 gas heating season. But before we begin, let's go over some basics for how these work. We have set aside some time for questions, and we strongly encourage you to ask them as they come up. Each of you will be muted throughout the presentation, so please use the text box to type your questions, and I will interject as needed to introduce the questions. You will see the chat function is at the bottom of the GoToMeeting control panel. Please feel free to send me an email with a question if you have trouble finding that or for help finding it. If anyone is interested in getting a PDF copy of this presentation, Chris has given us permission to send it along, so please send me an email at creiten@nwga.org or respond to my email that you received the link with this morning, and I will send that along to you. Also, this is being recorded, and we will post this to our YouTube page, and I can also send that link along if anyone is interested in that. So as some of you know, the NWGA hosts webinars like this one on the last Thursday of each month, and we will return for the new year on January 26th with John Horvick of DHM Research. DHM is among the best polling teams in the region, and John will give his impression on what happened in the 2016 regional and national election season and what it means for policy, both climate and otherwise, going forward. Sign up will be available on nwga.org in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. Finally, I'd like to introduce the Northwest Gas Association for those of you who may not be familiar with us and what we do. We represent the 6 investor-owned gas utilities operating in the Pacific Northwest, along with the 3 large natural gas transmission lines. Our members are located in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia. And as always, please visit our website at nwga.org for more information, or always feel free to send me an email at creiten@nwga.org. And without any further ado, let's pass things along to Chris.
Thank you very much, Connor. Let me get my presentation up here. I see that we have more than 25 folks on the webinar. I really do, gentlemen and ladies, appreciate your time. What I plan to do today is discuss some elements of the current U.S. natural gas market and also focus in on AGA's view of the coming winter heating season, which essentially was published in mid-October of this year as we approach the winter heating season. But of course, we have since experienced November, and we will be talking about some of the things that we can update associated with that original winter heating season forecast. But let's Let's first look at some basic
Chris,
market
we
observation.
can't see your show yet. Can you accept? Can you accept the presentation so we can see your slideshow?
I have it up on my screen.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry.
Let's see. I've got to send that your way. I'll try that again.
I can also exit out and try to go back in.
Yep. Let me know if you see that that option to accept.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. Okay, do we see it this time?
Let's give it one more run there. Did you see that, the option to show your screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I pressed on it. Sorry, let's try this again. Okay, it's telling me I am the presenter.
There we go.
And let's see. How about now?
We can see your screen, so we are all good.
Excellent. Thank you, Connor. I'm not very good with these systems. That's probably my problem. So again, we're going to talk about the current market. I'm going to look at some elements of expectations for the coming winter heating season. And as Connor noted, please, if you have any questions as we go along, it doesn't offend me for you to jump in with your questions. We probably have a little bit of time at the end of the session also, but happy to answer your questions as we go. So let's look at the natural gas market and some fundamental elements of the market as we see them in 2016, comparing them to last year. Domestic production in the United States through December 14 year-to-date compared to 2015 is down very, very slightly, less than 1%. Total consumption, including natural gas exports, however, are up a little over 1%. However, sector demand, not including the exports, are actually down slightly. Power generation is up. Residential and commercial consumption, however, given the fact that we essentially did not have a winter heating season event for much of the country during the first quarter of 2016, was down significantly, and that essentially accounts for the sector demand being down a little less than 1%. That is, the Rescom down 7.5%, but power gen up. Underground storage, as we entered this winter heating season, set another record for an inventory above 4 trillion cubic feet. And of course, as noted before, pipeline and LNG exports were up significantly, essentially because we saw the startup of the Sabine Pass LNG facility, Cheniere's facility on the Gulf Coast, in early 2016. In addition, pipeline exports or imports from Canada were also up consistently 2016 over 2015. Heating degree days. Everyone remembers, particularly in the eastern United States, the polar vortex winter of 2013 or 14. I would point out, however, that although the whole U.S. was considerably colder than normal, most of that was concentrated east of the Rocky Mountain front. So the Pacific region was actually 17.8% warmer than normal during that polar vortex year. The following year for the United States, it was slightly colder than normal. We're getting a little bit closer to our recent memories. The Pacific area, again, was significantly warmer than normal. Last year, of course, the entire country, based on heating degree days, was warmer than normal. The Pacific region also. And then beginning the 2016-2017 winter heating season, more specifically October through December 10th of 2016, we have seen considerably warmer than normal conditions, although we are beginning to get a colder event as we speak now. So what I'm going to go through is a few observations of a number of these critical elements that I've talked about already. Natural gas pricing, in addition to what I mentioned. Exports to Mexico, LNG exports, pipeline imports from Canada. Discuss these within the context of where we see them today, which will set the stage for leading us in to our winter heating season discussion. Within the context of the entire country in 2016, when we look at natural gas production, I make the statement on this slide, as I really do with all of my public speaking, that looking at 2007 through 2010, that was then, this is now. We are in a different place for domestic production in the United States, essentially because of what has happened in unconventional resources and the so-called shale revolution. In the first quarter of 2016, we actually saw a production record in the United States. Domestic production exceeded 73 billion cubic feet per day of dry gas production for a short period of time. It has since settled back more into a 70 to 71 BCF range, but we are still on the production side in the country in the rarefied air that we have seen as the shale revolution, the unconventional production increases in this country have taken hold. We are still seeing production increases in certain regions of the country, such as in the eastern United States, the Marcellus and Utica shales. In other areas, we're seeing some decreases, but overall, production has remained very strong. One of the things that has contributed to that during 2016, a period of time when natural gas prices relative to history were fairly low, were and are the inventory of drilled but uncompleted natural gas wells in the country. More specifically, this slide looks at the eastern United States, essentially areas of West Virginia, the Utica and Ohio, and the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania. What you will notice is starting in 2016, the drilling and uncompleted inventory in this area was around 2,000 wells, and it has been dropping rapidly. The expectation is that by 2018, this inventory of wells that were yet uncompleted and hooked up is going to have been used up, and we should be in more of a balanced position between the actual drilling that's going on in the area and that which would be then hooked up into the pipeline system to sustain or to add to production. So that's been falling relatively rapidly, and potentially is going to, in 2017, go away completely in the eastern United States. One of the other key things that has occurred during 2016, as you are all aware, of course, is that natural gas to power generation has increased once again. We're in record territory for 2016 in the amount of natural gas to power gen. That's coming on the heels of 2015 having been a record year for natural gas to power generation. What is happening right now, and the expectation is by the Energy Information Administration and others, is that actually Actually, that is going to flip a little bit during the winter heating season, that we should see coal regain its foothold for power generation, at least during the winter heating season, while natural gas prices are a little bit higher, and they are a little bit higher today at Henry Hub than they have been for the balance of the year. So there is a possibility that during this winter heating season, you will see more coal generation than we have seen in the more recent past. There have been articles that I've read looking at Texas and other ERCOT areas, for example, where coal has definitely begun to regain some of its market share during this winter for power generation. Just one of those sidebar things that's going on in the marketplace today. Why is this happening? It's essentially natural gas prices. We saw gas prices well below $3 for most of the year during 2016. Now we see the Henry Hub price at more like $3.50. That begins to put us in a place where on a per unit basis, coal is cheaper, and that type of dispatch possibility then begins to assert itself in the marketplace. One thing I want to talk about before we go any further, talk about the winter heating season or the rest of the marketplace, is to look at peak day natural gas consumption as we have seen it going back to 2007 and coming forward to 2016. If you will look at this graphic, these are the non-coincident peak days which generally occurred in January, certainly somewhere during the first quarter of each of the years noted there. In 2014, we had the polar vortex. I believe the peak day for the polar vortex was January 7th, maybe 9th, and we saw national consumption of natural gas nearly 140 BCF for that day, 138 and change. The following year, in 2015, when we had only slightly colder than normal conditions for the country compared to the prior winter heating season, we still saw a peak day in January of 132 BCF. And I'd like to point out also then that in 2016, during that first quarter, the peak day demand for the entire United States was 122 BCF during a period where we were essentially having a very mild winter event. Notice that all three of those years and those disparate heating degree day conditions associated with each one of them led to peak day consumption that was larger than any in the prior years, regardless of what the weather had been. This is part of what is structurally happening in the country. We are seeing power generation peak on top of heating load during the winter heating season. The structural things that are going on around the country where gas is taking a foothold from a consumption standpoint and a growth standpoint are beginning to show up in the statistics and data. So I just wanted to point that out to you as we go forward and look at some of this other information. While all of this has been occurring, what we have seen is relatively stable and low natural gas prices, again compared to history, 2014, then 2015 and 16, where we even saw some natural gas prices at Henry Hub below $2 per MMBTU for a period of time. That is extraordinarily low compared to history. We've seen the natural gas price come up during the balance of 2016, closer to $3 per million BTUs. And of course now the forward January price for natural gas at Henry Hub in the mid $3, $3.52 I believe when I looked this morning. I would remind you that when AGA published its vision of the 10-year period 2012 to 2022 back in 2012, we were at that time looking at relatively low and stable natural gas prices on average for the country, but our range for pricing was more in a $4 to $6 range rather than what we have seen recently, which has been more in the $2 to $4 range. So we have an extraordinary period of time where certainly customers are getting a great value from natural gas commodity prices. As I noted before, we entered the winter heating season in a relatively strong supply position for the country. Natural gas production was still above 70 billion cubic feet per day, and gas and storage had set a record. The EIA report today was the first triple-digit withdrawal from storage that we have seen this year. Withdrawals from storage have been very, very modest given the warm national conditions, if you will, throughout November. So we had a strong storage position as well as a relatively strong position in gas imports from Canada and production here in the United States. So we're still looking at a very, very solid supply picture as we move into the winter heating season. This slide looks at natural gas imports from Canada this year. The heavy blue line in the shaded area is actually the 5-year average, and you can see that imports from Canada were significantly higher in 2016 than they had been over that 5-year average, remembering that most of that support for Canadian gas came during this summer when we were having a relatively warm summer, gas injections into storage, but large volumes of gas going to power generation. At the same time as those imports were occurring, we are exporting significant volumes of natural gas to Mexico. Their pipeline infrastructure is beginning to expand, and what we have seen on a daily basis is significant growth in the exports to Mexico. And today, generally, we are exporting something in the order of 3.0 to 3.5, sometimes a little bit more, billion cubic feet of natural gas to Mexico every day. When you put the LNG exports that we'll discuss in a moment together with that, we find actually that the United States currently is exporting around 5 billion cubic feet of LNG and or pipeline exports to Mexico on a daily basis. That's a considerable change from just a little while ago. With respect to expectations for Mexico, if you look at 2016, the current export capacity is somewhere a little north of 7 billion cubic feet per day, and the expectation is that within the next couple of years, we're going to see it grow, essentially double to more than 14 billion cubic feet per day capacity. Whether that translates necessarily to more physical exports, most analysts believe that it will. But as I said, currently we're in that 3 to 4 BCF per day range right now. LNG exports did begin at Sabine Pass in February of 2016. Essentially, one train, then a second train were up and operating. There is a third and fourth train under construction as we look at it right now. But when not doing testing or not doing maintenance, the Sabine Pass facility has consistently seen approximately 1 BCF per day of feed gas to the liquefaction plant. So that is rising and has risen quickly during this 2016 period. Whether all of the capacity that we have planned and under construction here in the United States finds its economic niche in the world, LNG capacity festivities that are going on right now, with particularly Australia now beginning to ramp up their facilities to where they are actually producing more LNG also, still remains to be seen. There's some question as to whether that market is going to be oversupplied, some question as to the Gulf Coast and the East Coast right now, LNG facilities, the markets that they're going to serve. However, the construction on the facility, of course, at Cove Point in Maryland here in the Mid-Atlantic area, and the construction on the multiple facilities in the Gulf Coast area continues. There is going to be a little more competition. Woodfibre LNG in British Columbia has made the final investment decision to build, according to recent information. So that's the first facility in Canada to do that. So certainly it would seem like there will be even more competition in the Circum-Pacific area for LNG exports. So with those notations made, as we looked at the winter heating season for 2016-2017, we looked at a winter weather forecast that looked something like this back in mid-September. The likelihood of below normal weather or temperature conditions in the northern tier, essentially above normal weather conditions in the southern tier of the country, and in the middle portion of the country, the West Coast, and even the Middle Atlantic, more normal conditions. That's what we were looking at when we made our original forecast in for 2016-17 in October. Since then, the November 17th forecast, which I have here for heating degree days, for temperatures, as well as also for precipitation, really hasn't changed that much. A little more of a dip of the below normal conditions, and of course above average expectations for precipitation in the northern tier of the country also. So when we did our winter heating season expectations, and we were looking at natural gas winter heating season bills, the National Weather Service and EIA were looking at warmer than normal conditions for the country, which we have certainly experienced, but colder conditions than last year. We're also looking at a cost of gas that was higher than in 2015, but it was, of course, lower than it had been in 2014. We look at the EIA and other sources of information for expectations for the coming winter, but we also survey our own companies. We asked a question with respect to AGA members whether they expected normalized residential heating bills to go up this winter, and 62% of those responding said yes, 38% said no. And based on what we asked of them, we saw a somewhere around a 10% expectation for increases in bills for average customers and a 6.6% increase in throughput. Again, this coming from our own company-specific surveys. On average, we expected winter heating season bills to be something between 9 to 11% higher than they had during the previous winter. But looking at a longer time frame, this would still be a pretty excellent consumer value, with the fourth lowest bills nationally during the past decade. And winter heating season bills at their lowest really since the 2011 when winter heating season bills were at their lowest in the 2011-2012 winter heating season. Now, what we have seen since then is nationally conditions, and you've reflected this in the Pacific Northwest also, nationally conditions that have been warmer than even were expected, although we're beginning to get a little bit of the seasonality that we expect during the winter heating season. Natural gas prices seem to have been anticipating colder events because, as I noted before, the winter heating season forward strip for natural gas prices has been going up, and January is currently around $3.50 for Henry Hub. Now, I can say with respect to natural gas markets, there are some explanations for that. One of them has to do with the fact that we have seen a reduction in rig counts around the country, and we've seen a reduction in oil wells drilled in the United States. And of course, oil wells tend to produce associated gas. Associated gas production has been down, and it's part of the reason why production has gone from 73 BCF per day earlier in the year to closer to 70 to 71. And so there was I think, an analytical expectation that if there were cold periods during the winter heating season, that we would see some short-term price run-ups. Obviously, we're only here in mid-December. We're going to see whether the heart of the winter heating season brings those or not. So I'm actually going to stop there and ask if there are any questions about this, or really any other questions that you have with respect to the natural gas market that I can answer.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please again use the chat function below. So far, we don't have any questions there, but look forward to hearing from folks in that chat function. If you're having trouble finding that, please again just send me an email with your question, and we will get that answered. Well, actually, while I was speaking, we've got a question here, and that is, what is driving higher residential gas bills?
The residential gas bills, as we saw it for the coming winter heating season, we're going to be up a little bit for two reasons. And again, we're looking at a total national picture. The commodity costs for natural gas in 2016 compared to 2015 went up a little bit. Of course, we've seen that go up even a little bit more here towards the end of 2016. Also, there was a throughput expectation, as I noted before. So consumers were going to be using more if the winter heating season turned out to be colder than it was in 2015, as most expected. So essentially those two things, slightly higher commodity prices and additional throughput, would account for higher bills for the average consumer.
Great, thank you. Again, any other questions, please direct those to the chat function. In the meantime, I just want to thank you, Chris, for the work that you and your team are doing, as well as for taking the time to do this with us here today.
Happy to do so.
And we do have one more question, which is, do you expect natural gas and oil to return to their historical price equivalency on a per MMBT basis as more LNG export facilities are built?
Right now, I do not see that. Honestly, clearly on the oil side, we have OPEC acting right now to try to do something to firm oil prices up. They have not liked the international oil price at $50 per barrel or less. They are acting to try to increase that somewhat. We'll see how successful they are at doing that. In the United States, we're still insulated a little bit even with the LNG exports, remembering that currently those exports, the amount of gas going to liquefaction facilities, less than 2 BCF per day in a domestic production market of 71 BCF per day is just a fraction. It's just gas on the margin. There doesn't seem to be a significant push to move natural gas prices up and to sustain them. What is going to happen, and what has already happened in the marketplace, as you look at something like rig counts, is that in the last several months, certainly the last few weeks, we have seen rig counts of both oil and natural gas going up, really essentially responding to the pricing increases that we're seeing at the levels we're seeing them today. If that's the case, then we'll see more natural gas coming into the marketplace relatively quickly, not taking years as perhaps those things used to take. And even many analysts are positioning the United States right now as a swing supplier for oil around the world, remembering we are exporting liquids now. So I don't see that convergence in the future that I can see right now. I suppose it's possible, but I just don't see that right now. And the biggest part of that, I think, is still going to be natural gas having a relative pricing advantage here in the United States to the rest of the world, given our resource availability and the way in which our producing community seems to react to increases in price in the marketplace.
Great. So we do have two more questions, but before I get to that, I just want to remind people, I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but we are recording this again this month. So if you have any colleagues who may see some value in seeing this show, or if you'd like to review something that we heard here today, then I will be posting this to the Northwest Gas Association's YouTube page. You can email me for that link as well, and I'd be happy to get it to you. Again, just email me for the slide deck or for the YouTube clips. So we have two more questions. One being, will prices near $3.50 at Henry Hub be an incentive to drill?
Yes, is the short answer. We're already seeing it in the rig counts. Remember that essentially the position that the companies have placed them in over the last year and a half have put themselves in order to deal with the lower prices we've seen in the marketplace. It's really been a cost-cutting mode. Companies are running lean and mean. A $3.50 or even moving towards a $4 price for natural gas at the wellhead, not only and certainly oil going above $50 per barrel, that's going to elicit drilling activity not only for oil and subsequently for associated gas, but many, maybe even most, particularly when you start to get towards $4 per million BTUs, even dry gas plays become economic here in the United States, and you will see more activity at those kinds of pricing levels. So $3 to $4 from a producer standpoint, is a much better place to be in the market than what we've seen over the last 18 months.
Great. And the second of the two questions would be, are infrastructure costs increasing residential rates?
Well, I don't have that data in front of me. Certainly, I mean, I can answer the question in this way, and that is, I mean, we've been relatively public about our view that the relatively low commodity prices that we've seen, which have benefited consumers, have indeed left some headroom for additional infrastructure costs associated with build-out or additional safety measures, pipeline replacement, those kinds of things. This has been a good time to have those programs in place and to be able to fit them into a consumer's budget associated with energy consumption. So not having the numbers in front of me, I can't answer the numbers specifically, but in general, yes, there have been some incremental infrastructure costs associated with pipeline replacement, pipeline expansions that have been added to the cost of delivering natural gas to consumers.
Great. And pending any more questions that come in while I talk, again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to do it. And I think we're gonna call it. So anybody who wants to send me an email requesting the PDF of the slideshow, please do so, or the YouTube link that'll be posted here in about an hour. Thank you again, and we will look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Connor.
Thank you.
All right.
Alrighty, yeah.
Thank you for setting up the meeting.